Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET Live. It's Monday. I don't know how you guys feel about Monday. Sometimes they get a little tough. I actually am enjoying this one. A lot of good stuff coming in, information. Some stuff I gathered over the weekend and kind of held on to. Didn't go through everything on my Sunday show. Why give everything away? Why give it all away? Why make it easy for them? But HogvilleNET YouTube Live, Kevin McPherson, we kind of catching our breath as far as the travel part of it. I may be back on the road for several stops this week. I'm still trying to figure out where and what I want to do there. Had to iron up, take care of some family stuff, getting back to the 501 from Memphis this weekend. And maybe got my ducks in a row where I can get back on the road. We'll talk more about that as those things develop. But man, I saved some good stuff again in terms of who Arkansas is really kind of recruiting right now. Because I gave a lot of content from Memphis at Nike EYBL. I mentioned on the show yesterday, so I went through several names and leaving a breadcrumb trail for others from the work I was doing out there. I thought I'd save some breadcrumbs for today, and let's kind of own this, be out in front on something here in terms of the talking points and that kind of thing. Thanks for the afternoon update, Kevin. Thank you for thanking me, and thank you for being you and being here. And yeah, if you haven't done it already, hit subscribe, like, and share if you don't mind. We appreciate that. So this is going to be spread out just a little bit. I've really got three names to focus on from the 2026 class. Names we did not talk about on Sunday. Names that it was kind of interesting. I really tried to lay low on one of these guys at Nike EYBL. I think I did a pretty good job on that with this express intent in mind of kind of backdoor sneaking it in today. And I'm going to butcher this guy's first name, but class of 2026. By the way, we're also going to talk Carter Knox and an update I got from an NBA scout who was at the combine last week and kind of went through some interesting stuff with him. Boogie Fland, I talked to another source and had a kind of an interesting take on it. We'll save that one for last. Obviously, Fland visiting Florida. I think he's on campus today. But let's jump into class of 2026. A 6'3" combo guard, Akina Alozzi. I'm probably butchering that name. Some folks shorten it up to IKE, Ike, or Ike. Akina Alozzi, Alozzie, last name. Composite national number 10 5-star player. Plays with the 17 and under Utah prospects on the Nike EYBL circuit. Had a really, really solid, really good, outstanding first session out in Mesa, Arizona. Now, this kid plays at Dream City Christian out in Glendale, Arizona. And so he was kind of playing in his backyard in session one a few weeks ago. Nearly 22 points per game out there. As a 6'3" combo guard, a lot of people kind of also characterize him as more of a lead guard, point guard. And so some think he may be the best point guard in the country. But again, composite number 10, when you look at the composite rankings, obviously a 5-star. Arkansas coaches are focused on him as well. And, I was kind of keeping an eye on things to see, did any national guys put out that Calipari was courtside? Well, one of the things I was doing when I was showing Calipari and Chin Coleman, a lot of it was courtside, but one time I gave a reveal that Calipari liked to hover, be up at the top, looking down on, you could see all the courts. And so there were some games where he was positioned up there where I didn't put that out, and I intently did not put out video on Alozzi because I didn't want it out. But that's one of the guys Calipari was watching, and he did some of that from up top where he could see multiple courts, but he had his eyes on him. And that's a guy, when we use the word priority, we've got to kind of put that in a framework of, let's see who they actually bring in on visits, because they're talking to a lot of players about coming in to take visits. Some of these players have expressed it directly to me. We broke source information on Jordan Smith Jr., Arkansas and Kentucky after Peach Jam sometime. We'll see if that changes. Tyron Stokes, it got out. We were reporting for a while that our sources said Arkansas would be one of the remaining visits he'd likely take, and it was reported, I think, by Paul Biancardi that, in fact, Arkansas was mentioned. We'll see what dates shake out on that. Talked about Christian Collins, how he told me Cal offered him and he plans to visit. We talked about that on Sunday. Taj Ariza, well, we talked about him And I didn't intentionally leave this out. I just forgot to mention it. And when I interviewed him and I put that video out, it was really a brief interview. He wasn't real talkative after his game, but he did talk a little bit about liking Arkansas. And I asked him if he's going to visit. And he said, well, I really haven't started setting up visits, but most likely will. So he's talking about most likely will visit Arkansas. So that's the latest, probably the first or the most recent indication from him, another top 10 rated 5-star that was at Nike EYBL, that he's going to visit Arkansas. So we're giving you that now. Forgot to mention it yesterday. But Alozzi, I intentionally left off the radar for a day. Arkansas, to call him a priority, it's a guy that Arkansas will see if there's an offer that goes public anytime soon. I know Kentucky's a program that's really on him, Mark Pope. Several others. He's really raised his profile. That's somebody that Arkansas, let's go ahead and say we'll prioritize him for now. There's other guards out there. We mentioned it. Jordan Smith Jr., Jason Crow Jr., who I mentioned yesterday, may end up deciding to take a visit to Arkansas. Some of the stuff, talking with some of the Kentucky writers yesterday on Crow, was the fact that his dad has a real close connection with one of the Kentucky assistants, Jason Hart, and that Kentucky feels like they've got an inside track to him. We'll see. There's some mixed signals on that. Some think Jordan Smith Jr. may end up being Duke bound. I've got other sources that say, hey, I wouldn't count on that. Folks that think maybe that and he said he's going to visit Arkansas and Kentucky after Peach Jam, so we'll see. But as far as Alozzi goes, we'll see where this goes with Arkansas. Let's see if an offer gets made and goes public. Let's see exactly what shakes out there. But for now, I can confirm that Arkansas is prioritizing Akina Alozzi, again, a 6'3" combo guard out of Arizona, plays with the Utah Prospect 17U on Nike EYBL. And had some good performances. I got to watch him some. Again, I did not put any video out on him. That was just a choice that I made on that one. I wish I would have gone ahead and done that and just saved it until now, but I didn't do that. I should have thought through that a little bit and shared some of the highlights that I got of him. All right, here's a name on one of the other circuits, Adidas 3SSB. I told you guys yesterday, and I actually tweeted this when the weekend was beginning, I think on Friday morning, that Chuck Martin was going out to Council Bluffs, Iowa, to watch certain players that Arkansas has been recruiting. Most of those players I interviewed and showed highlights of when I was out in Bryan, Texas, covering Adidas 3SSB. It was not a live eval session, and that was a couple of weeks ago. And I interviewed these guys: Caleb Holt, top 10 rated 5-star; Tay Kinney, top 20 rated 5-star; Deron Rippey Jr. All of these guards, by the way, backcourt players. Another top 20 rated 5-star in Rippey Jr. So I interviewed those guys, put highlights out on them. But one of the players that, in addition to those guys, and we didn't talk about the Adidas stuff at all yesterday, just talked about what I saw and where I went. And I did mention the fact that I'd seen, a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't go through the names, but just out there to cover prospects I knew Arkansas was recruiting. Well, here's a name that you're going to recognize because he's already been on Arkansas's campus back in October. The Razorbacks coaching staff offered this young man in August. He visited in October, took an unofficial visit, class of 2026. We talked a lot about him at the time, put out a lot of content from his visit, attended an Arkansas football game. Chuck Martin was out to see him in December, and he was putting up crazy numbers. He had like a 42-point scoring game. And Martin was out to see him at one of these national high school events. But Adu Toure, the 6'6" wing, plays at Notre Dame High School in West Haven, Connecticut. That's another guy that Arkansas was out to see. Martin was out to see during that Adidas event this past weekend. And so I left his name on the shelf as well. I wanted to kind of revisit that because you're going, well, Arkansas just accepted a commitment from J.J. Andrews. Aren't they kind of the same? Let's not forget, Calipari's first recruiting class at Arkansas were two guys on the wing, both 5-stars, both ranked top 25, and Carter Knox and Billy Richmond III. This is not unprecedented for Arkansas to really look at going after more than one. You could have more than one at the same position. And Torrey's a guy, I think he in FIBA play last summer was putting up crazy scoring numbers. Was it New Guinea or one of those, whatever country he was repping, putting up crazy scoring numbers. And he had that 42-point game in December. But he's a guy that can score it. I remember talking at length about him hitting that game-winning shot in the Under Armour Elite 24 All-Star game. I think it was last summer, August maybe. It was a back-and-forth game, and it was at an Elam ending, and he hit the game winner, measuring himself against some of the top class of 2025 5-stars. But Torrey, I think the composite rankings right now have him ranked 23rd, a 5-star. So similar when you look at those rankings to guys like Carter Knox and Billy Richmond III. And so is there a problem with recruiting a guy like that on top of it, in addition to what you already have in J.J. Andrews? For that very precedent already at Arkansas in year one on the roster, I say no. I say no to that. And we know some of the other wing-type players. We just mentioned it. Taz Ariza. Christian Collins, more of a 3-4 kind of guy that could complement these kind of guys and be on the court with them. But there's other wings. I mean, Tyron Stokes, who's kind of a, jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife. I mentioned it yesterday. Can play the 1, 2, or 3, defend multiple positions, including switchable out on front court guys, and can hold his own for a bit against 4s and 5s. It's at the end of the day, if Arkansas, out of the 4 high school guys they target and try to get in a class, it wouldn't be unthinkable to nab a couple of wings that are versatile. Maybe that can play the 2 a little bit, play the 3, be a little 3-4 for you in some spots, be on the court with another wing. I don't see a problem here. So Akina Alozzi is the first name. That's a guard, combo guard, point guard. The other one now is Adu Toure, who's not a new name to us, but it's new in the recent talks in terms of Arkansas still prioritizing him. That's somebody they not only put eyes on again, but continue to recruit as a priority. So there's a couple of names there. It was important to know that. So one guy, again, this weekend at Nike EYBL and Alozzi, Toure at Adidas 3SB, and Arkansas coaches on court side or hovering above the court, or however you want to phrase it, keeping eyes on these guys because they're recruiting them. All right, here's one that I only put one highlight out on Nike EYBL. I did not talk about him yesterday, or if I mentioned his name, I don't think I did. I didn't go back and watch it again. I don't think I did. But it's a guy I was reminded about today. We've talked about him before, maybe as a lead up to going out there. I definitely put one highlight when Calipari was courtside, but it was the game where it was Mocan Elite playing Brad Bill Elite, so he was already there to watch J.J. Andrews. But Arkansas is still recruiting Jaylen Monti, a 6'7" small forward wing out of Owasso, Oklahoma. He's been on Arkansas's campus multiple times. Chuck Martin is kind of the lead on that again. But Arkansas is, and this guy's a shooter. He was competing head to head. He didn't have the best game against Brad Bill when I was there Saturday night. He probably scored 20-plus points. He hit some threes. He hit some big ones in a run where Mocan kind of got back in it, and JJ took the game over. A lot of ISO ball, rotating the ball into JJ's hands so he could start out top and pick and choose as a facilitator, pull-up shooter, or driver all the way to the basket. But on the other end, Monti was trying to keep his team in it, hit some threes, shot a lot of free throws. He got fouled on some three-point shots, but he ended up with 20-plus points. Arkansas is still recruiting Jaylen Monti. And it kind of makes sense because he's a guy, again, as a shooter. We keep talking about Arkansas needing to add shooters. Well, this is one that would definitely fit the bill. If you want to look at how Calipari's recruited high school since he's been here at Arkansas, we keep talking about, well, it's been guards and wings. Yeah, he's recruited a few big men. He brought Chris Sinak on campus. That was a guy Arkansas lost out on to Houston. That's not one where I consider Arkansas peeled away from late. Most they have on guys moved away from. That was not one that I saw that way. Nate Ament was a guy that I didn't necessarily see it that way. I thought Arkansas hung in there and tried to get him. But overall, it's been guards and wings, and Monti would be a shooter. When you look at all of the guys that Arkansas has really been on, it's been Nate Ament as a shooter. Monti would be that next guy in the 26 class as a shooter, as a sniper. He would be the kind of guy. It's close to his home. So it depends on how serious Arkansas are. By the way, composite number 18, national number 18, a 5-star. He's been a guy that's really kind of been a 5-star, a big contributor on some of the Team USA Team USA junior national stuff. A lot of that is played in the summer, but the mini camps are year round. They had one back in the spring, but he's been kind of a Team USA contributor for a few years now. Monti's been on some big stages, so that's just another. So when we look at, again, I bring up Carter Knox and Billy Richmond III for those that say, well, based on this current roster build and being kind of afraid to get crowded at positions. The one thing about this roster build, if you look at it as a 10 deep and assume Carter Knox is coming back, who we're going to talk about in a second with new information on him, that the one position where you could argue there's depth, if you're looking at as 10 players, is wing. Carter Knox, Billy Richmond, Isaiah Seeley, and even Kareem Artal, who's probably a 3-4, but at 6'9", has some wing stuff he could bring to the table. There's probably more depth at that position in the way they've recruited than any. So don't be blown away if J.J. Andrews isn't the only player, high-level guy at that, 5-star kind of guy that they go after. And now you know who some of these priority names are that we didn't talk about yesterday and nobody's talking about. They can ride the coattails tomorrow. All right, so let's move on now. And we'll have more to talk about. There's a lot of good stuff I got on a lot of these players, and I'm just going to kind of piecemeal some of it in so that we can own it fully, because that's how it should be. Let's move on to some Carter Knox data while we're at it here. Talked to one of the NBA scouts, one of my sources that was at the Combine all last week, and just wanted to give him a minute to breathe a little bit and before having a long conversation. And I really tried to start this off with just a text question. He called me and said, "Man, let's get into it. Let's really talk about it." I'm like, "All right." Trying to give you a little space there. Let's do it. But this guy really thinks he finally gave me a place where he could see Carter Knox getting drafted. And here's how he framed it. He said, "Look, I think he's coming back to school, but I think best case scenario for him at this point would probably be a ceiling of like somewhere in the 40s, maybe 45, somewhere like that. And that's probably a two-way deal. Maybe he gets some kind of guarantee worked out that in over 2 years wouldn't be as good as what he'll get at NIL at Arkansas." And remember, I told you yesterday that the staff had not been informed as of the weekend, wrapping up, from Carter Knox that he's coming back. They're not worried about it. Nobody thinks he's not coming back. Just that if you thought he'd already told somebody on the staff he's coming back, he hadn't. And then I started talking about, look, the way I see this is he's obviously still got the 28th. That's the deadline, May 28th, to withdraw, to come back. And I compared it to, a Devo Davis situation where he got one NBA workout lined up. Someone helped him out with that. And he waited till the last minute to withdraw so he could do that workout. It was always that he was coming back. It was just let him have that opportunity. That's part of the experience and going through that process, getting your feedback, performing at the Combine if you're invited, working out for teams if you're invited. And one of the things I brought up is one of the reasons I don't think that there's a rush on this timeline is maybe there'll be some teams that want to bring him in. Even if they don't intend to draft him, give him a chance to change their mind or just give him the opportunity. And that, he did enough with some of his measurables testing and all that to maybe warrant some of that. So this NBA scout, this is part of the intel. He says, I know for a fact there is at least one and possibly two teams that want to bring him in. And he said, and he goes, it's very unlikely that there are no more than that there's probably more than just those that he knows about. Now, that doesn't mean that Arkansas can't get him to go ahead and make an announcement if they up some NIL to a point where we're seeing some of that. Guys getting out early because they're getting offers that they can't refuse. What have we said all along about Arkansas's complete NIL purse for the roster? I always said, I don't think numbers are locked in for Carter because part of that's going to be getting him back. And maybe you raise him and maybe you have to. So a lot of that's going to be to do with what are some of the teams that might be wanting to bring him in for a workout. That kind of stuff may never see the light of day in terms of being, mentioned. Now, this scout told me who the teams are, the two. The one that he knows for certain and one he is heard and thinks. And this isn't about, I know something you don't know. I'm not going to out this guy. Giving too much information when he shared with me might out him. Just because it's some specific stuff along with it. So I'll leave that. I'll leave that out for now. I'll leave that out. But and maybe later I can bring that up. I'll have to ask him when dust settles and all that, yada yada. But we'll see. I'm not going to just offer it up. I'm going to circle back and respect that. But again, so we could hear it could break at any time. Knox is going to go work out for such and such team, and go have a meeting and do the individual stuff and all that. Or Arkansas could scurry to sew this up to make go ahead and get that done, coming on back, and maybe there's some money in there that rises to something that is better than going through that process for him, because it's not going to matter. The best thing for him to do is just to go ahead and come back to school. Or maybe they're like, look, man, we're going to take care of you. Go ahead and do this. Get these experiences. You've gotten a lot of feedback already. Why not? I mean, it could go multiple ways at this point for him, honestly. So we'll see. That's just the intel there for Knox today. Again, I can't give you all of it. I'm giving you some. More than you did before we came on here. Kevin, assuming he stays in the draft, what is the contingency for the team? What players are they looking? Okay, well, I'll just tell you this. We talked about Carter Knox and his performances. We went through, I've tweeted out highlights that I was recording off the broadcast, commenting on some of these episodes about his measurements and things he did well, what I liked, some things that stood out to me, and a few negatives, and that we still think he's most likely coming back. I mean, it's just still the same. It's just the same. Yeah, a little different information today, but nothing that changes a whole lot for me in terms of what I think will happen, that he ultimately comes back to Arkansas. But the one guy I didn't talk about, and I intentionally left this out as well, because I'm kind of saving. I want to save this for circling back to when, if there's a need, because Carter stays in. But let's just do it now. The people I talked to and what I saw, and I just didn't say much about it because we've spoken about Jameer Watkins so much, and I just don't want to keep beating the dead horse when the staff is saying over and over again, look away, look away. We've said it. Either they merely mean look away, it ain't happening, or they're operating in the cloak of darkness and it's just not the time for it now, and so why do it? Okay, why keep beating that drum and acting, performative, feigned, being exasperated over why aren't they after, I'm not going to do that crap. But I will say this, from the folks I talked to, from what I've seen myself, he's probably positioned himself as well as anybody. When you look at the players that participated in the 5-on-5, all the stuff, when you wrap it all up, he probably helped himself as much as anybody in terms of coming back to school and really raising that NIL flag and being a player that's highly, highly coveted. Arguably the most coveted if he comes back. Arguably. And you say, well, wasn't that kind of true anyway? Not necessarily, because we didn't know how he would perform or some of the things he would do. And I've just, like I said, I could have talked about some of this, last week when the combine was going on. I just thought, I'm tired of talking about him when it doesn't, right now, it's just not on the shelf. But, combine's over. I'll say some of that. Yaxel Lindenborg, mixed reviews on him. He's still got some late first round projections. We look at mocks. He needs a guarantee that makes it worth his while not to go to Michigan. Darian Williams, same thing. Guys like R.J. Lewis and, again, Jameer Watkins really, in my opinion, did a lot for their NIL to sweeten that up if they come back. I really think, because if you're thinking, well, wasn't that the case anyway? Yeah, but I think maybe even more so now. They may have raised what the asking price is just by some of the stuff they showed there, because if they can stand out in some ways in that light, imagine what they can do for your team with another year in college and what they bring to the table. So, those are just some of my thoughts on some of that coming on the other side of that. But look, I mean, here's the thing. Carter, I think, again, I believe he's coming back, but it's the same old thing. One team. Again, what if a team that has a pick says, look, we're in the second round here. We're going to work out a guaranteed deal with you. And you may play a lot in the G League for year one. And we don't need you on our roster to help us immediately. But we want to get you now. There's no one else we're going to take at that spot that's going to help us immediately. And there may not be too many guys that we would want to ask to go ahead and stay in to help develop over a year or 2 years and rely on later because we think you're going to be a first round value later. Let's go ahead and make the risk now and go ahead and do this now. those things could happen. All it takes is one. That's just one scenario. Some of the two-way offers that are come out there, that always boils down to money. That's not going to be anywhere near even 1 year, which you'd get in 1 year's worth of NIL. Not even close. Some of the guaranteed money over 2 years probably would be, and get you closer to the second contract. You focus full-time on an NBA career. You don't have school and the college game. It's apples to oranges when you compare the games. They're different sports almost. I know that sounds goofy. It's true. Look, there are some other things this scout told me about Carter Knox that I also won't share. Let's let things play out. And it's not necessarily, it's nothing about character or anything like that. It's just some stuff that, we'll just save it for another time. I asked him about Adu Thero. You're seeing more of these mocks. By the way, Jonathan Givoni updated his mock over Draft Express ESPN today. He had Adu Thero going 34th. Yesterday it was Jonathan Wasserman. I think he had Thero going 32nd or 33rd. So early second round in a couple of recent mocks. This particular NBA scout's not as high on Adu Thero. And a lot of that's the lack of shooting skill and a lack of, nuance and stuff I've talked about for a while. Not a lot of counter moves if you cut off his downhill A to B driving. This was just similar thought process to the scout, but we never really compare notes until we started really comparing them, where he kind of lines up from what he sees to what I have thought. I'm not trying to bag on the guy. I'm just saying, when you're looking at some of these drafts, all it takes is, again, a team or a couple of teams or three teams are like, man, right now we see him being so versatile defensively, the body, the athleticism. If we can work with him and get him to a point where he can just competently knock down a catch and shoot shot, we got ourselves a 3-and-D wing, and maybe a guy that can be really a difference maker defensively and be competent the other way. Then there are other scouts like this one go, man, I don't have him really higher than the mid-40s right now at best, because I just don't see enough skill there. And the kind of the idea is he's just a bully right now, and that will only take you so far at the next level, which is true. Some of the best bullies have to add more to get on the court and stay there in the NBA coming out, if that's really all they are. So we'll see. Again, this is just one scout's take on how they see some of that stuff. All right, 27 minutes in, almost 28. I'm Kevin McPherson. This is HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Thank you for joining me. Glad to be here. Look, Adu Thero, someone's going to draft this guy. All takes aside from what I'm sharing now, I don't see him. I mean, I guess he could, be a mid-second round guy. I could see someone jumping up and getting him in the late first round, because, again, there's enough good stuff with the physical parts. And the fact that it's taken a while. Some of the stuff that he's added, he's grown. Some of the stuff he's added to his game have moved the needle just a little bit. Shooting's not one of them. Ball handling's not one of them. But if there are teams based on the way they play and the kind of guys they go after, not everybody does it the same way at the NBA level. And I can see someone saying, man, I just love his upside defensively, and I just need him to be competent in one or two little things on offense. And we can work on that and get him there. And then we look smart in 2 or 3 years or 4 years when people are out there, the talking heads are out there recalculating what the draft should have looked like. And we put we bet on this guy and he made us look smart. So and then you could also be really dumb and by reaching and your job's on the line as a GM by decisions you make. So, I mean, it's a crapshoot. There's no guarantees with it. But I do think Thero's going to get drafted, and I think he's probably feeling good about where that is in terms of that it's going to happen, and he'll get some kind of guarantee. And I think he's left the door open to return to school. I think it's just remote, minute, very unlikely that happens. But, if it does, that would be Arkansas. So really, that's kind of the Carter Knox, Adu Thero. All right, so I talked to someone else just about Boogie, the fact that he's at Florida, wanted some insight, and one I haven't talked to about Boogie recently, but someone I've talked to Boogie before, and this is, kind of both a look at it from the NBA and college standpoint. But we were just kind of going through the pros and cons of some of these choices he's got. Is it Florida where he's visiting? It seems like kind of where the lead is there. You've heard NC State, Kansas, some other stuff, Arkansas, maybe as a third or fourth option, maybe a second option. Who knows? But this opinion, this is one I really respect when you look at the landscape of basketball. And we're talking about how Cal's doing this roster and how it will be log jammed with alpha lead guards. And, he made it work at Kentucky the last year there, but those guards had a myriad of shooting skill. I mean, elite 3-point shooting, not just good, elite outside of DJ Wagner. So you can mix and match maybe a little more comfortably and make it work. And he's like, look, I don't care about all that. You make it work. You should still be building your roster based on having depth, even if it's really quality depth. And Cal's done it before. We've talked about it before. So his take was he's going to have some of the same challenges at Florida if he goes there. And he started rattling off some of the names. Well, stuff we know they've added over at Florida. But he's right. There'll be some competition there. Who knows what kind of promise can be made where he doesn't feel like there'll be competition or it's not as obvious to him. But this I'll call him a guru who I really respect, spent a lot of years talking to, just thinks that Arkansas should be trying to retain Boogie. That's his take on it. And we've gone through the pros and cons. And I said the other day when we last talked about it, if Calipari can figure it out and get all the players he's recruited and what he's promised on board and show them a new way and that this is what makes sense, I'm all for it. Go get that done. We've said Boogie checked some boxes at this current roster, the way it looks, might be missing a few things. He's a guy that you can look at and go, he could add some 3-point shooting punch. We can look at his numbers from last year and parse out what we want to sell it. But just watching the guy shoot and seeing him getting grooves, I have a lot of confidence that could be something to be positive. I still think it's hard based on the way you constructed the roster and what you told folks to backtrack on that. I mean, at the end of this week, players are going to start this weekend. Players are going to start moving to campus. It's comeback time. Summer session 1 starts Tuesday of next week, 8 days. You've got the holiday, Monday, Memorial Day. Players will be moving in that weekend. So the 27th is the Tuesday. That's the start of summer session 1. Wednesday, the 28th, is the withdrawal date for the NBA draft at Carter. I mean, a lot of stuff's coming up really fast. We had a real busy week. We talked about all of it, and I was out everywhere covering that stuff. I may be out at more places later this week and through the weekend. We'll see what I end up doing. But it's about to really pick up in terms of getting your current roster in and then hoping Carter Knox is part of that. How soon do we hear from Knox? Does he decide not to go? I mean, if I had to call it right now, I would say he's more likely to go ahead and go meet with teams and work out with them. And if he doesn't, then that means Arkansas upped his NIL enough, most likely, to say, please don't do that. Remember last year, Nellie Davis was invited to the G League Elite Camp, a different thing, not the combine, not some of this. And he even though he left his name in the draft for a while, he declined that based on what Arkansas was offering him in NIL. He declined that invitation. It's a little different that, Knox has a better draft path even now than Nelly had then and has now. But it's still one that seems very less likely than likely. And so we kind of wrap up with that here. Almost 35 minutes in. I appreciate you guys being here. Hope you like the intel on some of the class of 2026 guys that we kind of shelved for a day to let you know Arkansas is still prioritizing some of these guys. We talked about, all the other J.J. Andrews playing beautiful music over the weekend at Nike EYBL. I did get to go back, by the way, as we wrap up and watch that Game 4 that was played out on Sunday. It's amazing because when you really look at his performances, I mentioned Game 1 when I got there Friday night. He had a slow first half, 6 points. He had just blew up in the second half, 17 points, efficient, getting it everywhere, and really it blew open a close game and helped and was kind of the catalyst for why Barrettville Elite just blew UPlay Canada out. I mean, it was just destroyed them. They don't even have a running clock rule when you get to a 30-point lead on EYBL. They keep stopping the clock every time there's a whistle. I thought that was kind of interesting. But he helped blow that game out. Well, and then we talked about the 32-point game. We talked about the middle game through Saturday night that was played Saturday morning that he didn't, it was another blowout from the get-go. He didn't play a whole lot. He didn't finish that play game because it was such a blowout and sat most of the fourth quarter, sat most, probably about half the game in game two where he scored, I think, 8 points. Just nothing to judge there. And then the 32-point game where it was more competitive, even though they ended up winning by 18, 91-73 over Mocan and Monti, and had the 8 rebounds, 7 assists. We went through all of that, the talking points, but went back and watched him against Team Wynot and Christian Collins. Taj Ariza did not play in that game. Collins had a big game. And I keep mentioning how these guys would complement each other. One is a wing that maybe helps the two, and Andrews, and Collins is a 3-4 kind of a guy. But JJ got hurt in the first half. Went out. Team got behind by double digits. Comes back in the third quarter and had another 17-point second half. So that's his second one in 4 games. And again, went nuts with the efficiency. Really, it's the same stuff. Gets a 3 ball in there, 3-level stuff. Everything we've been seeing. And so to come out of this averaging about 20 points per game, and to understand 3 of those games, he set out large amounts of clock. So he's putting up those numbers in not full games. Some guys are playing mostly full games, coming out for a breather here and there. His team was running away. They went 3-1. They ended up losing that game by 2, but he was a big reason they came back in it. Christian Collins, 23 points, 8 rebounds, big game from him. I'm over the moon with him. And I mentioned to you, yesterday and again today, Cal just offered him. He told me he'll probably visit in the fall, wants to visit Arkansas. But my player comparison with him, I really thought about this, is Pascal Siakam, who's not at the same stage. Siakam played at New Mexico State, but has grown into an NBA All-Star caliber, Friends All-Star. I think he's been an All-Star at least once or twice, but the last 7 seasons in the NBA between Toronto and Indiana, a 20-plus per game score, 7.5 rebound average probably over the last 7 years. Competent three-point shooter over his career, around 33%, but lately in the last few years raised it up to high 30s. But a 6'8", long, athletic, wiry kind of guy that can put the ball on the deck and drive and create, can shoot threes, can finish above the rim. Just a really versatile kind of player that game in and game out, you're not sure how he's going to beat you exactly. And that's Christian Collins. So that's my player now comparison. But I did watch that matchup, and in what was a really good game. Again, I wish I had been able to stay in Memphis and be there for that one in person. And kudos to JJ for being able to come back off that ankle injury and get back in that game and do what he did. Because he's a guy. When you look at his development, I've been really bullish on him as never relinquishing his 5-star goodies. It's not like he's really done anything just lately to reprove it. Again, I said it yesterday. He proved it over and over again when he went through Nike Peach Jam last year. When you look at his opportunities, everything, whether it's USA Junior National Team camp performances, some of the other stuff, it just keeps getting back to me that this guy is one of those guys, and yet the rankings slipped him up. And you hear some of these talking heads talking about, well, he's really developed. I've kind of been sleeping on him. He's really developed his lefty right change-ups and crossovers and all that. It's nothing new. It's what he's been doing for a long time. That's not new. That's not a new development. That's not something he just added. It's one of the things that was what made his game strong to begin with. Now, he developed it probably 18 months ago, and it was something that was lacking, some of the stuff that he does to get in his drive game. We talked about this part of his drive game, the cross-ups, switching hands and getting downhill, crossing dudes up. And he does it with quickness, explosiveness, power, bully ball elements. So some of the stuff that's being attributed to him now are things that were already out there for folks to evaluate and keep him as a 5-star. Some of the stuff just kind of surprises me. The shooting is something that he continues to work on. Percentages look good. He's been really kind of a low volume guy. And so, but 4 or 5 in that 32-point game was what I think he was officially credited with. And we know how percentages work. Even if you're low volume and you have a couple of off games, if you have one good game, you can be where you need to be. I think it's something he needs to continue to work on. The catch and shoot part of it, he looks more comfortable. One dribble setups and little moves to set it up. I think those are things that right now, it's kind of interesting to me. Those are things he'll probably continue to work on to add to that. Guys like Tyron Stokes, who can already do that, and some other maybe more polished guys when you start talking about shot skill. But the one thing I like about it is because it's not yet in his wheelhouse fully, he's not throwing that in there to in games. He's trying to win. What I say, he's not going to do stuff to make it about him. He's going to make it about winning plays. And so what I like about it is that I'm not seeing some of that stuff right now because I don't think it's quite there yet. I think he's one of those guys like an Isaiah Joe that's going to get himself, the more he stays in the lab and the more he perfects stuff, then he's going to trot it out there. And I respect that in players. And so if you're thinking, what does that really mean? It just means that he continues to develop, and you like to see where he's going with his 3-point shooting right now. So I want to hinge on that positive. I don't want to let that be kind of sound like an afterthought here, but I think he'll add more quality to that as he continues to develop, and we'll see how progressive that is by the time he gets through spring and summer, a full high school season at Little Rock Christian Academy, where he's probably, last year it was around 30 points and 11 rebounds per game. Probably going to be the Gatorade Player of the Year if he stays on pace and stays healthy. Someone reporting Boogie's already heading to Florida. Okay, well, that's, that doesn't surprise me one bit. So, but anyway, thanks for being here. We're almost 42 minutes in. Tried to sign off a couple of times, and I keep thinking, somewhat Nick Kremers, Boogie already headed to Florida. Kramers, I don't know how to pronounce that. I butcher names a lot. It's kind of funny. I'll do a little anecdotal thing on myself here. When I was younger and I'd hear these older guys talking and they'd just butcher names all the time or say the right first name, the last name. And I always thought, these are smart people, but why that? Why that? Why do they can't get that right? And I'm like, is that intentional for humor? Or are they just, and I do it all the time now. It's just, you get to a certain point where you've talked so much about players and some of the names are similar. They got the same first name. It just kind of comes out when you mean something else. Yesterday, I went Antonio Gates a couple of times before I corrected myself to Antonio Reeves. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I just do it. So for all those people who didn't know that I was judging them or thinking about judging them when I heard it often, I'm one of those guys now. You're welcome. It happens. So just having a little bit of fun here as we wrap things up. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Today's Monday Spasm is wrapping up here. Please hit subscribe, like, and share if you don't mind. We appreciate that. If something breaks, I guess Boogie Fland, if that's breaking and that's real, we're talking about it now. No shocker. He's gone, if that's true. If not, we, see what becomes true. And we'll talk about it. If there's anything else that breaks, if Carter Knox announces today or tonight that he's coming back, no, Cal's not going to overpay NIL. Another comment. If Carter Knox makes an announcement tonight, I'm jumping ass right back on here. We're going to do one again. And otherwise, I'll probably have something tomorrow on Tuesday. Those are my, a lot of my out of town days are Tuesdays and Thursdays for stuff I got to do. So it would be either really early, like 5:45 or 6, or in the evening, probably around 7:30 or 7:20, something like that. If I do one for Tuesday, I may save for Wednesday, but I might also be getting back on the road to cover NBA playoffs, Western Conference Finals round now. I'm still thinking about that, whether I'm going to want to get something like that done this week or save it until next. Some other locations I might hit this weekend to cover basketball. But thank you for being here. Until next time, take care of yourselves. We appreciate all of you. See you soon.